Hi, I'm Erica Walker.
Hello, I'm Hannah Robinson.
I'm Amy Osborne.
And I'm Lindsay Sparks.
Okay, so I will start. Um, my husband and I went on a cruise for our honeymoon. One night at dinner, we met another couple, Alex and Jenna, and we quickly became friends. We told them that we had just gotten married, and the conversation quickly turned to a history of our relationships, where we had met our significant other, and how long we'd been together, etc. Jenna and Alex told us that they'd been dating for 2 years. I made the comment that 2 years was a long relationship. They explained that they had talked about marriage, but they both wanted to finish their educations first. After they graduated, they planned to move in together to make sure it will work out before they make that serious of a commitment. Alex and Jenna's relationship progression is very typical of most relationships today. Many couples in our generation who have experienced firsthand the effects of divorce are now cohabiting before marriage to avoid the risk of divorce because they believe that if it doesn't work out, breaking up is much easier. Contrary to popular belief, cohabitation does not reduce the likelihood of eventual divorce. In fact, it increases it by nearly 46%. One reason for this is that while marriage relationships are held together by a strong ethic of commitment, cohabiting relationships tend to be less dedicated to the continuation of the relationship and more concerned with the individual's own personal autonomy. In cohabitation, both parties go into the relationship with an escape route, a trap door, an understanding that if it doesn't work out, there's always an easy way out. This is problematic for two reasons. First, they expect to some degree that it will not work out, and hence the if thinking. And I would like to point out that these are not thoughts that newlyweds have on their wedding day. Second, they have built an exit strategy. They are essentially going into this phase of their relationship with one foot out the door. Although the couple might see marriage in their potential future, once you begin a cohabiting relationship with the mentality that if it doesn't work out, I'll just move out, it's hard to switch to the whatever it takes till death do us part mentality necessary in marriage. Many couples fail to make this mental transition and go into marriage with the same one foot out the door thinking because little else in their lives and relationship have changed since being married because they were already living together. This becomes more likely the longer a couple lives together before marriage, thus increasing the likelihood of divorce. Another reason for this increase in divorce rates among those who cohabit is the lack of decision-making in the relationship. Many in cohabiting relationships report that it just happened. Couples move from dating to sleeping over, from sleeping over a lot to cohabiting, sometimes without even a conversation about why they wanted to live together and what it will mean. Oftentimes, individuals go into this arrangement with very different long-term expectations, but despite their differences, find it difficult to break it off once they've moved in together because of the financial and emotional costs associated with a breakup. They feel that they have already invested too much into the relationship, so together they stay until they eventually slip into marriage, only to discover a few short years later that this is not what they wanted out of a marital relationship. As you may have noticed, while marriage rates have been declining, cohabitation rates have risen dramatically. The U.S. Census Bureau statistics show 75 million unmarried heterosexual couples in the U.S., or that there were 75 million unmarried heterosexual couples in the U.S. in 2010, representing a 13% increase from 2009. 13% in 1 year's time. Yet despite their growing popularity, those in cohabiting relationships experience higher rates of violence, infidelity, and relationship instability than those in marital relationships. But the ramifications of this choice reach beyond the individual. Of greater concern are the children that are affected by this relationship. For children, cohabitation means greater risk of living within an unstable family structure, especially when their mother cohabits with a man who is not their father. Currently, 41% of all births in the United States take place outside of marriage. Children are increasingly being raised by single mothers, many of whom live in poverty and require assistance from the government for their support. And although many of these women are doing the best they can, these children lack the love, support, and guidance only a two-parent household can provide, which only serves to perpetuate the breakdown of the family as these children grow up without having a model of a healthy relationship in their lives. I couldn't find any international or federal policies currently in place that have sought to remediate this social problem. However, in the past, certain states, such as Illinois, have sought to discourage living arrangements competitive with marriage by failing to recognize cohabitation agreements, which is a cohabitor's version of a prenuptial agreement. So they failed to recognize these agreements as legally binding. However, laws have since been put into place granting legal rights to all civil unions. In my opinion, this is the wrong way to go about breaking the rising popularity of cohabitation. The great paradox of cohabitation is that this arrangement that people adopt to protect against a failed marriage is actually contributing to its demise. The problem lies with the fact that despite the research, the majority of young people still feel that cohabiting before marriage is the best way to avoid divorce. To me, that says that, like Alex and Jenna, they are not aware of the higher risks associated with this relationship arrangement. It says that there's a disconnect between what the relationship says and what the public believes. So rather than passing laws to dissuade people from cohabiting or denying cohabiting couples certain rights, what our nation really needs is to educate the public, particularly the young that have not yet begun to cohabit. Research shows that high school is an invaluable time to teach adolescents healthy relationship skills. I propose that we introduce healthy relationship skills classes into public high schools, designed to teach teens healthy dating, how to recognize controlling and unhealthy behaviors, communication skills, conflict resolution skills, and cohabiting in marriage. Through these classes, we can help to disseminate valuable information to the young children in our nation and teach them healthy relationship techniques that are more likely to result in stronger unions and a stronger society. Yes. Oh, you need
So
to
my question is, so what if two people are cohabiting because they have a child together? I mean, would you still say that they shouldn't cohabit if they have a child together? Because at that point, I mean, it's kind of, is that really in the child's best interest for, even if their parents are not married, to still not live together?
I wouldn't say for them to not cohabit. I'd say for them to get married, honestly. I mean, actually, cohabitation relationships break down much more often than marriages do. And so it's a very, I mean, everyone's like, well, what's the difference, breaking up or divorce? But the statistics are not even equal. Like 40% higher for cohabiting relationships, and it's usually a shorter period of time. So I don't know the exact numbers, but for instance, if a marriage lasts 10 years, a cohabiting relationship only lasts 5. I mean, that's usually where it's at. So it's just better for them to have that stable commitment made rather than having this instability in the child's life, especially.
Thank you. That was a great answer. I have another question too. So, do you think that, especially, I mean, people outside the church, there's this whole idea of not getting married, but thinking that you need to be older and it's, you're too young to get married type of thing. So, what would you say to people like that who are in a relationship? But, I mean, do you think that there are logical reasons? Because when I think about people that I know that have cohabited, it's because it's cheaper for them to live together because they don't have to pay, 2 rents and 2 utility bills and all that stuff. And obviously at that point, that's, when you know you want to get married. Well, no, that's not. That's a bad way to phrase it. But that's when you get married to someone. But, I mean, I mean, what do you think about that? My question is basically, are there no logical reasons for people to cohabit?
Um, it does make sense on the financial standpoint, um, but in the long term, it's not worth it, honestly. I mean, if you think about, like I said, it's kind of a slippery slope. They start out dating and then they start living together, and it becomes to the point where it's too uncomfortable to change, even if you're not happy. And so, yes, I mean, there are significant financial, you know, um, pros, I guess. But if you're ultimately not happy in the relationship, I mean, no financial pro is going to be worth that. And research has shown that most people in cohabiting relationships are not as happy as people in marriage relationships. So, I mean, happiness over finances, I don't know. What would you say?
Thank you. Those are both really good answers. Thank you.
So I have a question,
Yeah.
Erica. This is just one from my own life, so this is an example from my own life. But I have a friend that I talked to once about cohabitation, and her first question to me was, "Well, my parents cohabitated before they got married, and like they're doing fine, and you know what? They're still married." While I have a friend who is a member, I have a couple of friends from the members of the church who did never cohabitated, and they ended up in divorce. So it's just interesting because, like, kind of the premise of your speech was a lot about how cohabitation is much more likely to lead to divorce. Um, but what would you say to these cases, especially concerning members of the church, where to receive a temple marriage, they usually cannot cohabitate, and yet so many of our temple marriages seem to be ending in divorce now. So, just what are your thoughts on that?
Obviously every relationship is different, and I think that's why it's important to teach kids the importance of certain relationship skills while they're young. I think a lot of people don't have healthy relationships as models in their life, to model their own relationships after. And so, and I'm not saying that your friends in the church don't have that, but um, you know anything, if you're teaching skills before you go into any kind of commitment or career or anything, if you're taught the skills beforehand, then you're much more likely to be prepared for the commitment and the job and whatever else. So that's why I suggested that they have these relationship skills classes, because so many people don't have healthy relationships in their life to know what that looks like or know how to handle their relationships. And hopefully these courses would help teens to learn what a healthy relationship is and how to avoid divorce and how to avoid, I mean, even if they do go into a cohabiting relationship after they've taken this course, they at least know the risks associated with it, and how to prevent it and how to have a longer lasting marriage. So, I mean, no, not every relationship is the same, and yes, there will still be divorce, because for whatever reason, violence or infidelity or whatever else. But I think it will definitely decrease the divorce rates in our society and help to make things more stable for children.
Thank you.
Am I up to 5 minutes yet?
Yeah, you're right at it, actually.
Okay, awesome. Whose turn?
Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay, so I'll get started. So, in looking at the past 100 years, there has been significant changes in the family structure. From smaller family sizes to greater divorce rates and more abortions, the structure of the American family is certainly changing. And one of the most important reasons for this change, I believe, has been greatly overlooked, and actually in most cases is actually encouraged, particularly by our government. It is a practice that has become part of the normal American household, and there's no arguing that it has had a significant impact on families. So the issue that I'll be addressing today is women working and how that has affected the American family structure. Women have been workers since the very birth of America. So way back when, they worked alongside their husbands and their children in growing crops and using their work ethic and skills of survival to maintain the health of their family. Centuries went by, and they continued alongside their husbands, making sure that the family's needs were being met. The change began with the family structure in World War II, where the government started to elicit the aid of women and wanted them to help alongside the war effort. And immediately women took to it, and they applied their skills enthusiastically. And then at the end of World War II, many of the men came home, but many of the women did not. And that is where we really begin to see this change in the family structure. So as the number of working women outside the home began to increase over the years, there are statistics that have been finding that abortion rates, divorce rates, and smaller family sizes have all increased with the increasing number of working women. So in looking at the correlation between these numbers, I looked at a study entitled Working Class Feminism, a Consideration of the Consequences of Employment. And in it, it shows a definite trend among working women to support ideologies like political feminism. It says that as much as 97% of working women believed themselves to have a high or very high interest and involvement with political feminism. Compare that with the housewife, which was at 31%. But first of all, what is political feminism? So in looking at feminist.org, it says that they support safe, legal, and accessible abortion, contraception, and family planning. And they also support lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights. So political feminism's goal is really the empowerment of women, which can, in effect, go against the empowerment of families. This support for political feminism can be seen in the numbers related to abortions from 1970 to 1990. Now, we could have maybe seen, we would have seen a correlation before 1970s, but they didn't record the numbers before 1970 because it wasn't legal then. So just looking at the numbers then, we can see the impact that political feminism has had as we look at the city with the largest percentage of working women in the country. So I chose to look at New York City, which as of 2000, for the first time in history, women made up more of the workforce than men at 51.9%, which was a 15% increase from 1971. So New York City has also made up the largest number of abortions in the United States. For 2010 alone, 83,430 abortions were performed. That is the second largest number, that is the largest number, but the second largest number was the entire state of Texas at 77,413 abortions. And it is also interesting to note that the reasons most frequently cited for an abortion were that having a child would interfere with a woman's education, work, or ability to care for dependents. And that was at 74%. So although choosing to work does not necessarily mean you will have an abortion, the highest rate of abortions were among women in the 20 to 34 age group. This is the same age group that the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported had the most time spent at work than any other age group and the least amount of time doing household activities. New York City women are also known for leading the nation in single women at 41.7% of women 15 and older as unmarried. Unmarried women are by far the majority of those who obtain abortions. So since women entering the workforce, there has been a significant change in the family. We can also see this change in looking at divorce rates and smaller family sizes. So in looking at at the numbers, more women are remaining single and pursuing careers. So more women are, in fact, remaining childless. In 1976, 10.2% of women 40 to 44 remained childless. Compare that to 17.9% in 2002. Not only this, but the number of marriages has decreased as well significantly, while the number of divorces has greatly increased. In 1950, 11.1 for every 1,000 people were getting married. And as of 2001, 8.4 out of every 1,000 people were getting married. And then in looking at divorce rates, in 1950, it was 2.6 for every 1,000 people are getting divorced. And in 2001, 8.2 for every 1,000 people were getting a divorce. So we can see large numbers in those changes. So since women entering the workforce, we have seen a significant change in the family just by looking at these characteristics. I know I only really addressed a few, but I feel like they are a significant characteristic of the secure family structure. In looking at government policies, we actually see them encouraging women to work all around us. Companies receive tax breaks for having women have internships at their companies. My brother-in-law just yesterday was telling me about how in the CIT major they specifically receive tax breaks for allowing more women, and they're actually required by law to have women in internships there, as well as employed agencies. So they need to actually have a certain amount of women that they employ. So I think that government agencies should stop supporting women working as they force companies to actually hire women, because it leads to the deconstruction of the family, and it actually encourages all of these characteristics that are anti-family. And it's important for us to realize that the family structure is important to the security of our nation. And in supporting working women, you are, in fact, threatening that security.
Hi. I have a question for you. So
Yes.
actually, I have a lot of questions. Let me see. So I guess you said that you don't want the government to encourage women to work. So what do you do about single moms who that is their only income in their lives? Or
Right,
the cost
absolutely.
of living, where a lot of, like where I live, most women in my ward even work because there's not a real industry here, so like the husband doesn't make that much in a typical job here, and so you kind of have to have two household incomes.
I totally understand. So my mom actually worked. She worked in an apartment complex.
Mm-hmm.
So in looking at this issue, I actually addressed that a lot in my paper. But it's not necessarily that I think that no women should work. That's kind of not really my goal, because I understand single women. I understand the need for extra income. That was the case in my family where my mom had 10 children. Really, I think the problem comes when the government is so behind encouraging these women to work. I know in entering college, I did not consider anything. I did not consider being a mother just at home, because I felt like my only worth lied within working outside of the home. So I think the government can do better in schools, where we can educate women on the importance of sustaining family life and the family structure, or even in a working situation, perhaps helping women to see that political feminism isn't the only ideology out there, helping women to see that their worth and success in the family is not dependent on a career. No, I don't know if that really answers your question. But like I understand the situation, and every situation is going to be different. I just feel like to the extent that the government has taken in supporting and actually encouraging women to work, it's actually making our it's actually deconstructing the family structure, which is important for the security of the nation. So they're actually putting the nation in danger
Right. So
because they're
how do you suggest that they show people that they will have worth if they are stay-at-home moms or whatever?
that's a really good question. And this is something that I'm still thinking about because I think that's absolutely important. I've thought about classes for parents to make sure they understand the importance of family life. Um, I guess really the point of my paper was to show that there is an impact with working women. Whether they're married or single, there is an impact on family structure. And family structure is important to government. Um, So even in providing community classes for parents to understand this effect that working women have had, and and I also feel like I don't really understand why the government needs to put so much emphasis on working women when women will work anyway.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I feel like um, there. I just feel like there isn't as much of a problem with women willing to work as the government seems to.
Makes sense. Anyone else, or should I just keep throwing my questions out there?
I have a question. So before World War II, which is where you kind of put your focal point as like this is where it really switched from moms staying at home to them being in the workforce, which is pretty. That's I think that's pretty common knowledge. But before that point, a lot of women felt like they were repressed by their husbands and things like that, and they didn't get education, and women in the past have been almost like undervalued and just were kind of, and less respected. Do you think that now, if we were to encourage women to stay at home, do you think that it would undermine the work of women gaining their equal rights and respect that they have since World War II?
I see what you're saying. And I've actually done a lot of research, particularly about that time before World War II, where women felt like they were just the housewife and that they were stuck at home, and there was even like a perfectionism mentality at that time period. And I actually think that was just as detrimental as the working woman. Um, because as a culture, we seem to devalue the worth of women back then, even when they were at home and supporting. Um, I feel like, I mean, as women have progressed in their in women's rights and obtaining more rights concerning work, um, I guess I'm not arguing against the fact that they receive those rights, that they are able to work. I guess I'm not fighting against that they should be able to work. I'm fighting that the government is actually encouraging women to work. So it's I absolutely agree in that fight for women being able to have an equal voice in the workplace and being able to show that they do in fact have a work ethic and that we have a right to participate in government um, and in job opportunities. But I guess I am fighting against the fact that the government is encouraging women to work when I think that is actually a, a detrimental point to our society.
Thank you. That was a really good answer.
All right. Who is up next?
I guess I'm up.
Wait 1 second. Let me reset my. There we go. Go ahead.
Well, let me get mine up here too. Okay, so we're going to go back briefly to when I was 11 years old. I'm just going to kind of give a small little intro story to my paper. So I was searching for something to eat for lunch when I opened the door to the garage, and I found my mom looking through a box of old photos. I sat down and started looking through them too. I found one that looked like my mom and another man smiling. And at first I thought, okay, this is just a joke. And they looked like they were in love and happy. And it was a different man than my father. And I had no clue who this guy was. And I seriously thought it was a joke. So I held it up and started kind of waving it. And I was like, oh, hey, Mom, like, what's this? What are you doing? And I turned it over and it said Tamara and Ron. And I was just getting really confused, and I was still laughing about it because I really did think it was a joke. And then she was laughing along with me, and then she started crying, and she took the picture from me, and she kind of said, she said, Amy, I had hoped that you would have been older when you found this out. And then she told me that she had been married once before my father, and I was just shocked. And then I found out that I had a stepsister, but I never even knew her name, or I didn't even know she existed. So I guess I felt really confused and a little bit betrayed. It hurt me because I knew that my mom hadn't really been 100% honest with me my whole life, and so having that experience gave me kind of like it gave me a good view of this problem of divorce and the effect that it has on families as well as children. Okay, so divorce is the termination of marriage vow between a couple. It wasn't very prevalent that a couple would get divorced in the past. The divorce rate in 1850 has gone from almost none to 18,140 in 2012. And data shows that the rate of divorce usually spikes during recessions, which I thought was kind of interesting. It is now very prevalent for a divorce and termination of marriage to occur. This has degraded the definition of a family because it has made the family a very easy thing to be terminated and canceled. And I feel like that's exactly the view that the world has on marriage, is that it can be canceled, and it's just a contract that you can get out of whenever at least one person is not happy. So it's much less of a commitment than it should or even used to be. This is a very disappointing thing because of how damaging it is to the concept of the family. Too many children have been victims of divorced parents. This is very damaging to their development as a person. Children of divorced parents are more likely to be divorced later in life. And I think that's probably because their parents are obviously the people that they'll look up to, and later when they get married, they'll look to them as kind of an example. And seeing that it's happened before makes it a lot more realistic and like an option that people use, and it's not necessarily a bad option. So I think that is, I think that's pretty sad that that children of divorced families have better odds of being divorced because of that. It is unarguably one of the leading causes for the deterioration of the concept of the family. So I didn't find anything in particular that the government has necessarily tried to, like any programs or things that they've tried to do, but in my research I did find an article that, or a website that they put together, and it's called unitedfamilies.org. And it's not really a program, but I guess it definitely covers this, so I thought I would share it with you guys. It says here, governments have a great stake in responding to an epidemic divorce rate. Indeed, government can never create enough safety net programs to compensate for such comprehensive failure in marriage. Divorce prevention should be a high priority around the globe, beginning with a renewed effort to provide positive pre-marriage training, crafting public policy to strengthen existing marriage, We must reverse the decades of marital decline by not bullying into the divorce culture notions of same-sex marriage or any form of contemporary sexual liberation. We must regenerate a culture that understands the significance of marriage, and in doing so, give our children back their lives and their most basic human right, their mother and father bound together in a faithful marriage covenant. And I thought that was really great that they put that out there. I think it clearly illustrates the problems and the things that need to be fixed about it. So what can we do to avoid divorce? I think it really all boils down to communication. There's several things that stem off of that, though. I would say that the next most important thing in this prevention is honesty. Communicate how you feel and what needs aren't being met. Because when a couple is trying to maybe think of divorce as an option, there's definitely needs in that couple or in that relationship that aren't being met, and I think that they need to be addressed in order to have any hope of remedying that situation. So talk about the future and where you want to be. Be open to change. It takes two to tango. So pointing fingers won't solve anything. You guys both need to be honest, and like I said, I think it really all just boils down to communication. So communicate those needs and try to find solutions. It is important to work out our problems with our spouse so that we don't let it go to the point of divorce. There are always times that will be hard in marriages. It's kind of goes with the name of it. Those times don't have to be judgmental if taken care of properly. So that's all I had for my article. Any questions? Go. Sure.
Okay. So my question is, I think I just need to understand that beginning story a little bit. So your mother had been married before, right? And then she got a divorce, and then she had you, right?
Uh-huh.
So for your paper, you talked about the negative effects of divorce.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you start off with that story because in reality, you wouldn't be here if she hadn't had a divorce.
Yeah. I would say that. Oh, sorry, keep going.
Oh, no, yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
I think there's negatives and positives that come out of each of them. I definitely don't think that it was a positive thing for her to get divorced. Now, there's always situations where one person just will refuse to be honest and communicate, and that's really sad, because then there's nothing that the other person can do, no matter how hard they want to communicate or try to work that out. So, and I'm not sure exactly what it was like in my mother's case, but I know that there have been positive things later on after she got divorced. Like, obviously me and my siblings were born, and my mother and father now have a wonderful relationship. But I don't think that those things happened because of divorce, if you know what I mean. I think it was something that happened later on in life, but it didn't really correlate, if that makes any sense.
I think so.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, did you already have your hand up? Okay. So I was just going to ask you, do you think that this is something that the government should, step in to try to make divorce, less easy? Or do you think that this is something that, the government has no place in, and, the marriage relationship is just between the man and the woman, and, government should stay out of it?
Maybe I skipped over this part, but I had written that I think that government, to be honest with you, I don't know that there's really a lot that they can do, because if a couple is really angry, the last thing they're going to do is walk over to the government and say, hey, fix our problems. So, but I do think that if they could do preventative things, like if the government could have programs that would maybe teach communication and emphasize on that, then I think it would prevent a lot of problems because, like I said, I think it's the number one leading cause of divorce is just communication. If people would just be able to understand and communicate their problems and their needs that aren't being met, then I think it would solve a lot of problems.
So being a child of divorce and having gone through, actually, my dad has had two divorces now, and I mean, do you think that because of the effects on the children that it's do you think that children are affected every time? Because I mean, I like, for example, I mean, I know that like for myself, I was very, very young when my parents divorced, but then I was a senior in high school when my dad divorced his second wife. So I mean, I've had different experiences with it. One I don't even remember because I was so young, and then another one where I remember very clearly because I was almost an adult at that point. So I mean, do you think that it has effect on children at any age? And like for me, I feel like I'm pretty well adjusted, having gone through divorce twice. And but I mean, I don't have any problems with like trust or anything like that in my own marriage, but I can see it in my brothers where they have, behavioral issues and things like that because of divorce. Do you think that all children are impacted differently, or do you think that they're more susceptible at certain ages? I mean, what do you think?
I think that it really depends on the child, and I think that also during your most developmental years, I think that's when you're most affected by it. Um, I don't know. I think it could go either way, but when you're young and when with your first divorce, you obviously don't remember too much about it. But I'm sure if you could go back and see in the moment, I'm sure you as a little 5 or 6 year old or however old you were, that it kind of shook your trust in the family a little bit, and you just didn't. Maybe you were confused and didn't know what was going on very much. But I know that being exposed to such a negative relationship, it does have effect on the children. No matter if they know what's going on or not, they're still exposed to it, and it's definitely kind of a negative energy around. So, but I think also when you're older and reaching your, I did a lot of research on this, but reaching your um, adolescent years, that's when it has the largest effect because you're, I don't know, I feel like you're a little bit more unstable. You're starting to realize that mom and dad aren't all knowing and that they aren't all perfect. And when you're a child, you just kind of think, oh, mom and dad knows everything. They're, or at least I did, anyways. I just thought they were, um, perfect adults, and adults know everything. But when you're reaching adolescence, you start to realize that your world is changing a little bit, and um, so I think that it has a much greater effect on you during that time. But I think it all depends on your developmental um, age and the process that goes along with that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, Erica, if you're ready. Okay. So I know a woman who, when she was very young, she got pregnant and didn't think that she could be a mother. She thought, there's no way I can do this. I don't have the financial means. Don't, I mean, the father isn't in the picture anymore. And so she decided to have an abortion. And then years later, she told me about her experience when she was older and about how it was, in her mind, almost the worst decision she'd ever made because she thought every day for years and years, and like even to this day thinks about what that child what it would have looked like, what it would have acted like, been like, what color its eyes would have been. Like she thinks about if it was a boy or a girl, and what it would be doing now or what it would have grown up to do, at and so she wondered every day about things like this. And even down the road when she had more children, she thought about that would fill the void a little bit, but it really didn't. I mean, a child's still a child, and she could never ever forget about her decision to have an abortion. So we're all members of a family. We all, have a mother or a father or some form of family we all can associate ourselves with. So, let's think about the children in our lives, like whether it be our siblings, our cousins, our nieces and nephews, and anybody that you can think of that is a child in your life. And we can all agree that we don't have the right to go around and just say that their life isn't worth anything. So the basic of all human rights is just to live is being taken from millions of children worldwide every year through abortion. So according to the Guttmacher, I can never pronounce that right, but Guttmacher Institute, which is the leading expert on abortion, and they do a lot of studies and things like that, and a lot of statistics. So about 21% of pregnancies, excluding miscarriages, so pregnancies that are actual going to be babies, and an abortion, 21%. And in 2003, worldwide, there were 41.6 million abortions reported, and that number is only going up. So many people support abortion as a valid form of birth control. On the feminist website, they talk about how abortion should be considered a good, valid, and useful form of birth control. They talk about how it's important that women are able to take control of their own bodies and be able to make that decision if they think it's right. So continuing on with statistics from the Guttmacher Institute, about 50% of pregnancies in America are unplanned. So 50% of all women who get pregnant did not plan on it. They didn't expect it. So right now in America, we're going through something called a sexual revolution, where a lot of people are caring and they talk a lot about their own sexual rights and the importance that they have the right to have sexual relationships with anybody at any time for any reason or no reason at all. They support this in the feminist website, that it's empowering to take control of your own body and things of that nature. So one government policy that has come from abortion that is used is from a court dispute and has now become part of the law, is called Roe versus Wade, and I'm sure all of us have heard of it. It was a hearing that judged it unconstitutional for the state of Texas to ban abortions except in saving the mother's life. So the law in Texas was that you could not have an abortion unless the mother's life was in danger, in which case they did make the exception and allow the mother to terminate the pregnancy. A woman then sued the state of Texas saying that it was unconstitutional, and then it made to the Supreme Court, and they did decide that that was unconstitutional, and they actually concluded that no state could ban abortion within the first trimester of pregnancy. So this policy and law has come through people wanting to get an abortion, and the policy is really individually focused because you don't really think about how this affects the family, and even on like the feminist websites and everything like that, it talks about how it's the woman's choice. It's her choice to have an abortion, and no one else can have a say. Even the father of the child doesn't have a say in whether or not that child gets aborted. It's really just down to one person letting her choose it or not. And even though some states, unless she's a minor, of course, then some states, not all, some states require to have a parental consent if the woman is a minor. So this is really addressing the symptom and not the problem, just because the government is not thinking about what are causing these abortions. There's no education about birth control, and we're not teaching the children the importance of family. We're not teaching them how to look beyond the importance of just themselves and like the selfishness of feeling that this is all about me. So abortion is just really a symptom of the devaluing of the family in general. So Roe versus Wade really undermines the family, and it tells women that it's okay to have sexual relations because if you end up pregnant, you can just terminate the pregnancy. Like, it's just a form of birth control. It doesn't take into consideration that women have already made a choice to have unprotected sexual relationships. They have already made a choice. They have to accept the consequences as well. You can't choose your consequences after you've made your choice. In order to combat this issue, we can start in our home. We can teach our children the importance of life and of the rights of children. We can vote. Voting is how we can spread our voice, and we need to have a voice and speak for those who have none. Thank you. Go ahead, Hannah.
I guess this is a question that I have because I actually studied a lot about abortions and abortion rates, and this is an issue that I came up to. But you say that they're not emphasizing contraceptives and they're just supporting abortions. But in actually a lot of the new sexual education programs, they're emphasizing contraceptives. So, and actually abortion rates are going down, specifically within the past few years. The highest rates were in 1990, and they've slowly actually gone down a lot in the last 20 years. So, what would you say to that? The fact that like the government is emphasizing more with contraceptives, so that abortion rates are actually decreasing.
I actually read that too, and like I would say that there are a lot of people who are getting abortions still and still thinking that it's an okay method of birth control, and when it's not birth control, it's really just after you're not family planning, you're not using those contraceptives. But I would say that a lot of people think that they want to make it okay. And I would say that it's not something that's just okay willy-nilly, and a lot of people suffer from making those type of choices. So even though the government has been advocating for contraceptives and using those methods of birth control, which is great because, I mean, pregnancy is not the worst thing that can happen to you. There's a lot of sexually transmitted diseases out there that are, that are even worse than pregnancy. So I would say that it's important to teach people more about family planning and being able to make a decision about their own actions rather than saying don't have an abortion because it's bad or whatever, but just teach them the importance of life in general.
Interesting, because I know that sorry, really fast. One other thing that I came up to was the idea that having an abortion actually would have like in a child's life, they found that if the parent does not want to have the child, they're going to have a life that is very psychologically detrimental to them, and they actually receive more abuse as a child than if the mother had supposedly aborted them when they were younger. That was an argument that I heard as well.
That's actually a pretty valid argument, just because you don't want a child to have a psychologically detrimental life, but at the same time, I mean, if you really, really do not want this child, at that point, I would say find parents who do want it. There's lots of people who want to adopt children. There's no reason to end the life just because you personally feel like you don't want it and you don't want to take care of it. And honestly, I don't know how a woman can have a child and like bond with it in their womb and give birth to it, and then still after all that not want it and abuse it and have it psychological damage. At that point, I think there's something that needs to be said about the mother. But I mean, to be honest, I would say if you really, really have those feelings, then you need to just give your child up for adoption when it's born. There's no reason to keep it if you really, really do not want it.
Thank you.
I have a question. Okay, so this is something that I've kind of, I mean, obviously it hasn't happened to me, but I was just wondering what I would do in this situation. What if a girl was raped and she became pregnant because of that, and it was nothing that she did, like it wasn't her own consequences or anything. Like what would you suggest in that situation?
I honestly, I would be kind of for her getting an abortion at that point because it doesn't. What it really comes down to is people trying to use abortion as a form of birth control, like as in general life, as in like not they're not taking responsibility for their own actions. Rape isn't a choice. Having multiple partners in sexual relationships just because you want to, that's a choice. And rape, you didn't have a choice. So in that sense, I mean, it's where like it's really a hard line to walk because I mean, yes, it's still a child's life, but I mean, it would be really hard to keep a child that would remind you of that terrible thing that happened to you, and it would just remind you of it every day. And I think at that point I would consider adoption just because of that trauma.
Okay, makes sense.
I think we're done, ladies.